I never expected that a simple garage repair would lead to such chaos. But when my insurance company sent an adjuster to inspect the hail damage, I had no idea it would trigger a neighborhood war. There I was, standing in my driveway, photographing the countless dents covering my garage door when the storm hit. Not another hailstorm, but Hurricane Karen from the Pinewood Estates Homeowners Association. My name is Yates Lawson, and until 6 months ago, I barely knew what an HOA was. Having spent most of my adult life in apartments in Chicago, the move to suburban Nashville was supposed to be a peaceful transition, a place where my software development career could continue remotely while enjoying a bit more space and a lot less noise. Pinewood Estates seemed perfect: modern homes, well-maintained streets, and a community pool that reminded me of childhood summers at my grandparents' place. The realtor had mentioned the HOA, of course. "Just standard stuff," she'd said. "They keep the neighborhood looking nice. The fees are reasonable." What she failed to mention was that the president of said HOA considered herself the unofficial mayor, judge, and executioner of all things aesthetic in our little corner of Tennessee. The hailstorm had hit on a Tuesday afternoon in late April. Golf ball-sized chunks of ice pummeled the neighborhood for nearly 20 minutes. My 2-year-old Subaru took a beating, but the garage door got the worst of it. Dozens of small dents that, while not affecting functionality, looked like someone had gone at it with a ball-peen hammer. I called my insurance company the next morning, and they scheduled an adjuster to come out the following Monday. "Make sure to document everything," the claims representative advised. "Take photos of all damage before anyone comes out to look at it." That Sunday morning, I was doing exactly that, standing in my driveway with my phone, meticulously photographing every dent, when I heard the distinctive clickety-clack of expensive sandals on concrete. "Excuse me," a voice called out. "What are you doing?" I turned to find a woman in her late 50s with an ash-blonde bob and sunglasses perched on her head. She wore white capri pants and a floral blouse that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. "Just documenting some hail damage," I explained, gesturing to the garage door. "Insurance adjuster is coming tomorrow." The woman pursed her lips, her eyes narrowing as she studied the door. "That looks terrible. You can't leave it like that." "I know. That's why I'm filing a claim. Should have it fixed by the end of the month, hopefully." "The end of the month?" She sounded horrified. "That's unacceptable. I'm Patricia Whitfield, president of the Homeowners Association." She extended her hand as if granting me the privilege of touching royalty. I shook it briefly. "Yates Lawson, nice to meet you." "That eyesore needs to be addressed immediately," Patricia continued, gesturing to my garage door. "Section 8.3 of our covenant clearly states that all visible property damage must be repaired within 7 days." "I understand, but I need to wait for the insurance." "Insurance is your problem, not the association's," she interrupted. "If it's not fixed by Wednesday, you'll be fined $100 per day." Before I could protest further, she spun on her heel and marched away, leaving me staring after her in disbelief. I finished taking my photos, making sure to capture every angle of the damage, and went inside to look up this mysterious Section 8.3. After an hour of reading through the densely worded HOA covenant I'd received at closing but admittedly never read, I found the section in question. It did indeed require prompt repair of visible damage, but with a caveat Patricia had conveniently omitted. Unless awaiting insurance adjustment or contractor scheduling, in which case temporary measures should be taken to improve appearance. On Monday morning, the insurance adjuster, a friendly guy named Marcus, came by to inspect the damage. "Yeah, this is definitely hail damage," he confirmed, making notes on his tablet. Pretty straightforward claim. Good job documenting everything makes my life easier. How long before it can be fixed? I asked, thinking about Patricia's deadline. Once I submit this today, probably about 3 weeks for approval and scheduling a contractor. Maybe less if you're lucky, 3 weeks. Patricia was going to have a field day with that. Is there anything I can do in the meantime? The HOA is already breathing down my neck. Marcus chuckled. Yeah, they tend to do that. You could throw a tarp over it or something, but honestly, it's not that bad, just cosmetic damage. I thanked him and went to work in my home office, trying to focus on code instead of neighborhood politics. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I expected it to be a package delivery, but instead found my next-door neighbor, Julian Martinez, standing on my porch. "Hey, Yates," he said, an uncomfortable expression on his face. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. Patricia's on the warpath about your garage door. She was at the Thompsons' place this morning talking about how she's going to take care of the eyesore herself if you don't. Take care of it." "What does that even mean?" Julian shrugged. "With Patricia, it could mean anything. Just watch out, man. She's been president for 6 years and nobody runs against her because they're scared of what she'll do." I thanked Julian for the warning and spent the afternoon searching for temporary solutions. I ordered a garage door cover with a wood grain pattern that promised easy installation, but it wouldn't arrive for another 2 days. To appease Patricia in the meantime, I taped a note to my garage door explaining that repairs were pending insurance approval and a cosmetic cover was on the way. The next morning, I left early for a breakfast meeting with a client at a downtown Nashville cafe. The meeting went well, and I decided to spend a few hours working from the cafe to enjoy the change of scenery. It wasn't until I returned home around 3 p.m. that I discovered what Patricia's taking care of it actually meant. My garage door had been painted. Not professionally, not carefully, but hastily slathered with a beige paint that not only covered the dents, but also dripped onto my concrete driveway. The note I'd taped up was gone, and in its place was a printed citation: violation remedied by HOA. Homeowner to be billed $350 for materials and labor. Fine for non-compliance, $100. I stood there, phone in hand, mouth agape, trying to process what I was seeing. Then, slowly, methodically, I began taking pictures of the poorly done paint job, the drips on the concrete, the citation itself. Next, I recorded a video walking around, documenting the unauthorized work from every angle. When I'd finished documenting, fury took over. I stormed down the street to Patricia's house, a large colonial with immaculate landscaping 6 houses down from mine. I rang the doorbell, my free hand clenching and unclenching as I waited. Patricia opened the door, a satisfied smile spreading across her face when she saw me. "Ah, Mr. Lawson, I see you've discovered our community improvement project." "You painted my garage door without permission," I said, struggling to keep my voice level. "That's trespassing and property damage." She waved a dismissive hand. "The HOA covenant gives us the right to remedy violations after proper notice, which you received. You should be thanking me I saved you from accumulating more fines." I had a note explaining that repairs were pending insurance approval, which is explicitly allowed in your own covenant. "A note is not a repair," she replied, her smile never wavering. "And now you won't have to worry about it. The bill will be included in next month's HOA statement." "I'm not paying for something I didn't authorize," I said. "And you've potentially jeopardized my insurance claim by altering the damage before the adjuster could complete the process." "That sounds like a personal problem, Mr. Lawson," Patricia said, her voice sickly sweet. "If you'd like to contest the charge, you're welcome to bring it up at next month's association meeting. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have dinner to prepare." Before I could respond, she closed the door in my face. I walked back home, my mind racing. This wasn't just about a garage door anymore. This was about someone entering my property without permission and making unauthorized changes that could affect my insurance claim. Inside, I called the insurance company and explained the situation to a claims representative. "Wait, someone painted over the damage after the adjuster's visit?" she asked, sounding concerned. "Not after before. The adjuster was scheduled for yesterday, but my HOA president took it upon herself to fix the problem on Sunday." "That's problematic," the representative said. "The adjuster needs to see the actual damage to make an assessment." "I have photos and videos of the damage before she painted it," I explained. "I was documenting everything for your adjuster." "That's good," she said, relieved. "Send those over right away and we'll have the adjuster review them. As for the unauthorized painting, that's something you might want to consult a lawyer about." After ending the call, I forwarded all my documentation to the insurance company. Then I did something I'd never thought I'd do. I called a lawyer. The next morning, I met with Jennifer Mitchell, an attorney who specialized in property disputes and HOA issues. Her office was in a converted Victorian home near downtown, the interior modernized while preserving the charm of the original architecture. "So," Jennifer said after I'd explained the situation, "your HOA president painted your garage door without permission, potentially interfering with an insurance claim, and now wants to charge you for it." "That's right," I confirmed. "And from what my neighbors tell me, this isn't the first time she's taken matters into her own hands." Jennifer nodded, making notes on a legal pad. "Unfortunately, this kind of behavior is more common than you'd think. Many HOA boards, especially those with long-standing leadership, start to believe they have more authority than they actually do." "What are my options?" "First, don't pay that bill," she advised firmly. "Second, send a formal letter demanding the HOA restore your garage door to its pre-painted condition so your insurance can properly assess the damage. If they refuse, we can file for an emergency injunction. And if they've already interfered with my claim, we'll cross that bridge if we come to it. The good news is you documented the original damage, which was smart. Send me those photos and videos, and I'll draft a letter today." I left Jennifer's office feeling better about the situation, but my relief was short-lived. When I arrived home, I found another notice taped to my front door. "Emergency HOA meeting tonight, 7 p.m. Community Center topic. Property maintenance violations. This wasn't a coincidence." Patricia was escalating the situation, trying to use the full weight of the HOA against me before I could challenge her actions. At 6:55 p.m., I walked into the community center, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance that housed a small gym, a meeting room, and a kitchen. About 20 other homeowners were already there, sitting in folding chairs arranged in rows. Patricia stood at the front, a PowerPoint presentation ready to go on a projector screen. I took a seat in the back row, nodding to a few neighbors I recognized, including Julian, who gave me a sympathetic look. At exactly 7 p.m., Patricia called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for coming to this emergency session," she began, her voice carrying the authoritative tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "As you know, maintaining the aesthetic standards of Pinewood Estates is our top priority. Property values depend on it." She clicked to the first slide, which showed a picture of my house specifically, my garage door before it had been painted. "This is what happens when homeowners neglect their responsibilities," Patricia continued. "This unsightly damage remained unaddressed for over a week, violating our covenant. The next slide showed my garage door after her paint job, though the photo was carefully angled to hide the drips and uneven application. The association was forced to take remedial action, as permitted by Section 12.1 of our covenant. I raised my hand. Patricia pointedly ignored me. The homeowner in question has been billed for the materials and labor, plus a standard fine for non-compliance, she continued. "Excuse me," I called out, standing up. "I'd like to address this since you're discussing my property." Patricia's smile tightened. "We have a procedure for comments, Mr. Lawson. If you'd please wait until... Since this emergency meeting was called specifically about my property, I think it's reasonable for me to respond now," I interrupted, walking toward the front of the room. "Especially since you're presenting incomplete information." A murmur ran through the gathered homeowners. Patricia's face flushed. "Very well. 2 minutes." I turned to face my neighbors. "First, the damage to my garage was from the hailstorm last Tuesday. I immediately filed an insurance claim, and an adjuster was scheduled to come out Monday. I was in the process of documenting the damage for insurance when Miss Whitfield informed me I needed to repair it immediately. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector, replacing Patricia's carefully curated images with my own documentation. This is the note I placed on my garage door, explaining that repairs were pending insurance approval and a temporary cover was on the way. I swiped to the next photo. "And this is what I found when I returned home yesterday: unauthorized painting, done so poorly that paint dripped all over my driveway." The room grew quiet as I displayed more photos, ending with the invoice taped to my door. The HOA covenant does allow for temporary measures while awaiting insurance or repairs. I was taking those measures. What the covenant does not allow is for anyone, including the HOA president, to trespass on my property and potentially interfere with an insurance claim. Patricia stepped forward. "Mr. Lawson's time is up. I'd like to point out that as president I have the authority to..." "Actually," a voice called from the middle of the room, "I'd like to hear more about this." An older gentleman stood up. I recognized him as Dr. Reynolds, who lived at the end of my street. "Patricia, did you authorize this work personally, or was it a board decision?" Patricia hesitated. "As president, I'm empowered to make emergency decisions for aesthetic violations. Without board approval," Dr. Reynolds pressed. "The full board wasn't available on such short notice," she said defensively. Another homeowner raised her hand. "Who actually did the painting? Did we hire a professional?" Patricia cleared her throat. "My nephew has a painting business. He offered a discounted rate for the association." The room erupted in conversation. I stood quietly, watching as the meeting Patricia had called to shame me into compliance began to backfire. Dr. Reynolds raised his voice above the chatter. "I move that we suspend any charges against Mr. Lawson pending a full review of this incident by the entire board." "Seconded," called several voices. Patricia's face had gone from flushed to pale. "We don't have enough board members present for a vote." "Then let's take a straw poll of the homeowners present," Dr. Reynolds suggested. "All in favor of suspending charges against Mr. Lawson." Nearly every hand in the room went up. Patricia looked around, clearly caught off guard by the rebellion. "This is highly irregular," she protested. "The covenant clearly states." "The covenant also states that board members must recuse themselves from votes involving family members," Julian pointed out. "If your nephew was paid for this work, you should have recused yourself from the decision." Patricia's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Finally, she gathered her papers. "This meeting is adjourned. The board will review this matter at our regular session next month." As people began to file out, several neighbors stopped to talk to me, expressing support and sharing their own stories of run-ins with Patricia's excessive enforcement. It seemed I wasn't the first homeowner to face her wrath, just the first to challenge it publicly. Julian clapped me on the shoulder as we walked out together. "Man, I haven't seen Patricia shut down like that since, well, ever. You might have started something here." "I didn't want trouble," I admitted. "I just wanted my insurance claim processed normally." "Sometimes trouble finds you," Julian replied with a grin. "By the way, a few of us are thinking it might be time for some new blood on the HOA board. Elections are coming up in August." Back home, I emailed Jennifer a summary of the meeting and the unofficial vote to suspend the charges against me. Her response came quickly. "Good progress, but don't let your guard down. I've seen HOA presidents like this before. They don't give up power easily. We'll proceed with the formal letter tomorrow." The next day passed quietly. The garage door cover I'd ordered arrived, and I installed it, covering the sloppy paint job with a surprisingly convincing faux wood grain. It wasn't perfect, but it looked better than Patricia's beige disaster. 2 days later, Jennifer's letter was delivered to Patricia and each HOA board member by certified mail. The letter outlined the unauthorized entry and modification of my property, the potential interference with an insurance claim, and the apparent conflict of interest in hiring Patricia's nephew. It demanded the HOA restore my garage door to its pre-painted condition within 7 days or face potential legal action. That evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia, her usual confident demeanor replaced with barely contained anger. Was this really necessary? She demanded, waving Jennifer's letter in my face. "I think it was," I replied calmly. "You entered my property without permission and potentially jeopardized my insurance claim." "I was trying to help the neighborhood," she insisted. "That damaged door was an eyesore." "You could have helped by respecting the process I already had in motion." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You know, I've been president of this HOA for 6 years. In that time, I've raised property values by 42%. People move here because our standards keep this neighborhood beautiful." "I appreciate high standards," I said. "What I don't appreciate is someone painting my property without asking and then trying to charge me for it. The board is meeting tomorrow to discuss your demands," she said, spitting out the last word. "Don't expect them to roll over as easily as some of the neighbors did at that meeting." After she left, I called Jennifer to update her. "She's gathering the board to discuss your letter." "That's actually good news," Jennifer said. "It means they're taking it seriously. If they're smart, they'll agree to your demands and try to move past this. And if they're not smart, then we'll see them in court," she replied simply. The next day, I received an email from the HOA board, not from Patricia, but from the secretary, a man named Thomas Wagner whom I'd never met. "Dear Mr. Lawson, the board has reviewed your concerns regarding the recent painting of your garage door. After consideration, we agree that proper procedures were not followed. The HOA will arrange for the paint to be removed and your garage restored to its previous condition, at our expense. Additionally, all charges related to the painting have been voided. We apologize for any inconvenience this has caused and appreciate your patience as we work to resolve this matter. Regards, Thomas Wagner, Secretary, Pinewood Estates, HOA." I forwarded the email to Jennifer, who responded with a thumbs-up emoji followed by, "Good outcome. Let's make sure they follow through properly." 2 days later, a professional painting crew arrived at my house. The foreman introduced himself as Carlos from Tennessee Valley Restoration. "HOA hired us to strip this paint and get your door back to original condition," he explained. Gotta say, not the best paint job I've ever seen. It wasn't my choice, I told him. Carlos nodded knowingly. Yeah, we get calls like this sometimes. HOA's going rogue. Don't worry, we'll take care of it. The crew worked efficiently, using a special solvent to remove the beige paint without damaging the door underneath. By afternoon, my garage door was back to its pre-painted, hail-damaged state, dents and all clearly visible. I immediately took new photos to document the restored damage and sent them to my insurance company. The claims representative confirmed they would proceed with the claim based on both sets of photos, my original documentation, and the newly exposed damage. That evening, I was grilling on my back patio when Julian hopped the low fence between our yards, carrying 2 beers. Figured you could use one of these, he said, handing me a bottle. Saw the painting crew today. They got it all fixed up. Good as new or bad as old, I guess, I replied, accepting the beer gratefully. Julian clinked his bottle against mine. You know, word of your victory has spread through the neighborhood. Patricia's not happy. It wasn't about winning, I explained. It was about her not having the right to do what she did. Either way, you've got people talking. Julian took a sip of his beer. A few of us were already planning to challenge the current board at the next election. Patricia's been running things like her personal fiefdom for too long. After this, I think we might actually have a shot. Over the next few weeks, life returned to relative normality. My insurance claim was approved and a contractor scheduled to replace the garage door in early June. The temporary cover remained in place, keeping the neighborhood aesthetically acceptable according to HOA standards. I didn't see much of Patricia during this time. According to neighborhood gossip, she was laying low after the board overruled her on my case. Some speculated she was plotting revenge. Others thought she might be reconsidering her approach. In mid-May, my new garage door was installed, a sleek, modern design that actually looked better than the original. The installation crew had just left when a silver Lexus SUV pulled into my driveway. A woman in her early 40s with dark hair emerged, carrying a portfolio. "Mr. Lawson," she called. "I'm Jessica Morrison, Vice President of the HOA. Do you have a moment to talk?" Warily, I invited her in. Unlike Patricia, Jessica seemed genuinely pleasant, complimenting my house as we settled in the living room. "First, I want to apologize again for the situation with your garage door," she began. "It should never have happened, and the board is taking steps to ensure nothing like it happens again." "I appreciate that," I said, still cautious. "The reason I'm here," Jessica continued, opening her portfolio, "is that we're revising our covenant and procedures. We've realized that some of our policies have been, well, overly rigid. We're creating a more reasonable approach to property maintenance and repairs, especially in cases involving insurance claims." She showed me draft documents that outlined more flexible timelines for repairs, clearer procedures for violations, and most importantly, explicit limitations on the board's authority to enter private property or make modifications without owner consent. "We'd like your input on these changes," Jessica said. "Given your recent experience, you might have valuable insights." I spent about an hour reviewing the documents with Jessica, suggesting a few additional safeguards and clarifications. By the time she left, I felt cautiously optimistic about the direction the HOA was taking. "One more thing," Jessica said as she was leaving. "The annual meeting and board elections are in August. Several homeowners have suggested you might consider running for a position." The idea caught me off guard. "I hadn't thought about it," I admitted. "Think about it," she urged. "Sometimes the best way to improve a system is from within." After Jessica left, I called Julian to tell him about the visit. "Jessica came by your place." He sounded surprised. That's interesting. She and Patricia have been joined at the hip since forever. She seemed genuine about wanting to reform things, I said. Maybe, Julian replied, sounding skeptical. Or maybe they're trying to neutralize you before the election. Co-opt the opposition. You think it's some kind of trap? I think HOA politics can be as cutthroat as national politics, just on a smaller scale. Patricia's held power for a long time, and she's not going to give it up without a fight. The following weekend, the neighborhood held its annual Memorial Day barbecue at the community pool. I hadn't planned to attend, still feeling like something of an outsider, but Julian insisted. Come on, man. Free food, free beer, and a chance to meet neighbors who aren't trying to paint your house without permission. The barbecue was actually enjoyable. I met several families I hadn't encountered before, all of whom seemed to know about my HOA showdown. Most expressed support, sharing their own stories of Patricia's overzealous enforcement over the years. She cited me for having my trash cans visible from the street, one woman told me. They were out for less than an hour while I was cleaning my garage. She measured the height of my grass with a ruler, an elderly man added. Said it was a quarter-inch too tall. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself in conversation with Dr. Reynolds, who turned out to be a retired law professor. You've stirred up quite the hornet's nest, he observed, nursing a bourbon on the rocks. Patricia's been untouchable for years. No one successfully challenged her authority until now. I didn't set out to challenge anyone, I explained. I just wanted to handle my insurance claim properly. Nevertheless, you've created an opportunity for change, he said. I've lived here since this development was built, watched it grow from dirt roads to what you see today. The HOA served a purpose in the beginning, maintaining standards as the community developed. But over time, especially under Patricia's leadership, it's become oppressive rather than protective. Jessica Morrison came to see me about revising the covenant, I mentioned. Dr. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Did she now? That's unexpected. Jessica's always been Patricia's right hand. She seemed sincere about wanting reforms. Perhaps, he mused, or perhaps they're trying a different approach to maintain control, the old change to stay the same strategy. As the barbecue was winding down, I noticed Patricia holding court near the pool house, surrounded by a small group of homeowners. Our eyes met briefly across the patio. She gave me a tight smile before turning back to her conversation. On my way out, Jessica approached me again. Have you thought any more about running for the board? She asked. Still considering it, I replied honestly. I'm not sure I have the time or experience. Experience isn't as important as fresh perspectives, she assured me. And the time commitment isn't as bad as people think, one meeting a month, a few hours of review. Think about it. June arrived with sweltering heat and the kind of humidity that made even short walks to the mailbox feel like trudging through soup. My work kept me busy, and the garage door incident began to fade into background noise, an amusing story to tell rather than an ongoing battle. Then, in mid-June, I received a certified letter from the HOA. Inside was a formal notice. Dear homeowner, this letter serves as official notification that your property at 1428 Pinewood Lane has been found in violation of Section 5.2 of the Pinewood Estates Covenant regarding lawn maintenance. Specifically, excessive weeds in flower beds and failure to maintain proper edging along the sidewalk. You have 7 days from receipt of this notice to remedy these violations. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $50 per day until the violation is corrected. Sincerely, Patricia Whitfield, President, Pinewood Estates, HOA. Attached were photos of my front yard, with circles highlighting a few dandelions in the mulched areas and grass growing slightly over the edge of the sidewalk. I stared at the letter in disbelief. My yard wasn't perfect, but it was far from neglected. I mowed weekly and had hired a service for seasonal maintenance. This felt personal, Patricia's way of reminding me she was still in charge. Rather than confronting her directly, I took 3 actions. First, I spent Saturday morning meticulously weeding and edging my yard, going above and beyond to make it immaculate. Second, I took detailed photos of the completed work, documenting compliance. And third, I emailed these photos to the entire HOA board, not just Patricia, with a polite note confirming the issues had been addressed. The following week passed without incident. Then another certified letter arrived. Dear homeowner, this letter serves as official notification that your property at 1428 Pinewood Lane has been found in violation of Section 7.4 of the Pinewood Estates Covenant regarding exterior fixtures. Specifically, unauthorized installation of security cameras visible from the street. You have 7 days from receipt of this notice to remove these fixtures or apply for retroactive approval. Failure to comply will result in a fine of $75 per day until the violation is corrected. Sincerely, Patricia Whitfield, President, Pinewood Estates, HOA. This was getting ridiculous. The security cameras were actually the small solar lights I'd installed along my walkway, standard items sold at every home improvement store in America. I checked Section 7.4 of the covenant, which did require approval for security systems but made no mention of landscape lighting. This time, I forwarded the notice directly to Jennifer, along with photos of the solar lights in question. Her response was swift. This is harassment. The covenant doesn't regulate landscape lighting of this type. I'll draft a response today. Jennifer's letter to the HOA board was polite but firm, pointing out the misapplication of the covenant and noting a pattern of targeted enforcement that could be construed as retaliatory. She concluded by requesting that any future violations be reviewed by the full board before being issued to ensure accuracy and fairness. 3 days later, I received an email from Thomas Wagner, the HOA secretary. Dear Mr. Lawson, after review, the board has determined that your landscape lighting does not require approval under Section 7.4 of the covenant. The violation notice has been rescinded. The board has also voted to implement a new procedure requiring secondary review of all violation notices before they are issued. We appreciate your patience as we work to improve our processes. Regards, Thomas Wagner, Secretary, Pinewood Estates, HOA. It seemed the board was growing tired of Patricia's vendetta as well. July brought even more heat, and the annual neighborhood Independence Day celebration, a parade of decorated golf carts and bicycles, followed by a potluck picnic. I'd signed up to bring a watermelon salad, my mom's recipe that had always been a hit at family gatherings. At the picnic, the neighborhood dynamics were impossible to miss. People had formed distinct groups, those still loyal to Patricia, clustered around her at one table, and a larger contingent spread throughout the area, many of whom made a point of stopping by to chat with me. Have you decided about running for the board? Julian asked as we filled our plates. Nominations close in 2 weeks. I'm still on the fence, I admitted. I'm not sure I want to get that involved in neighborhood politics. Sometimes the politics find you whether you want them or not, he pointed out. And from what I hear, you've already got a lot of support. Later that afternoon, Jessica approached me again, this time with Thomas Wagner in tow. Yates, have you met Thomas? He's our board secretary and has been instrumental in pushing for the covenant revisions we discussed. Thomas, a soft-spoken man with salt and pepper hair, shook my hand warmly. "Your situation highlighted some serious flaws in our procedures," he said. "We're grateful for the opportunity to make improvements." "I'm just glad things are moving in a positive direction," I replied. "They are," Jessica assured me. "And they could move even faster with new perspectives on the board. The nomination deadline is July 15th, if you're interested." After they walked away, Dr. Reynolds appeared at my side. "They're recruiting you hard," he observed with amusement. "Why?" I asked. "I'm the newest homeowner in the neighborhood. There must be better candidates." "Because you stood up to Patricia and won," he replied simply. "That makes you a symbol of change, and in politics, even HOA politics, symbols matter." The following week, I received what could only be described as a peace offering an email from Patricia herself. "Dear Mr. Lawson, I hope this message finds you well. Upon reflection, I recognize that our relationship got off to a rocky start. While I maintain that all my actions were in service to maintaining our community standards, I acknowledge that my approach may have seemed heavy-handed. As you may know, board nominations close soon. Rather than continue any perceived conflict, I would like to suggest a compromise. If you're considering running for the board, I would be willing to appoint you to the Architectural Review Committee now, before the election. This would give you insight into our processes and allow you to contribute your perspective immediately. Please consider this offer and let me know your thoughts. Best regards, Patricia Whitfield, President, Pinewood Estates HOA." I forwarded the email to Julian, who responded with a single line. "The spider invites the fly for tea, Dr." Reynolds was more nuanced when I showed him the message. "She's trying to neutralize you by bringing you into the fold. Classic co-option strategy. The question is whether you can effect more change from inside her system or by challenging it directly." After careful consideration and conversations with several neighbors, I declined Patricia's offer politely, explaining that I preferred to maintain independence while I considered whether to run for the board. 2 days before the nomination deadline, I made my decision. I submitted my name for consideration, running not for president but for an at-large board position. Julian and 4 other homeowners also submitted nominations, creating the most contested HOA election in Pinewood Estates history. Patricia's response was swift and predictable. The final page included a subtle warning: change for change's sake can be risky. Inexperienced leadership could jeopardize the stability and value of your largest investment. Trust the team with a proven track record. The battle lines were drawn. Over the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood transformed into a miniature political campaign ground. Patricia's supporters placed small yard signs promoting her slate. Our group, which had loosely organized under the banner Pinewood Renewed, focused on door-to-door conversations, and a simple one-page platform emphasizing transparency, flexibility, and community input. The campaign took an unexpected turn when a longtime resident named Martha Jenkins approached me after seeing me talking to neighbors. "You're the garage door guy, right?" she asked, inviting me onto her porch for lemonade. "That's not the title I'd choose, but yes," I admitted with a laugh. "I've got a story you might find interesting," Martha said, settling into a wicker chair. 3 years ago, Patricia's nephew, the same one who painted your garage, was hired to repaint all the pool furniture. The board never voted on it, and the invoice was nearly triple what similar work had cost in previous years. "How do you know this?" I asked. "I was the treasurer then," Martha explained. When I questioned the expense, Patricia produced a competitive bid that was even higher, justifying her nephew's price. But I later learned that bid came from his friend's company. They were effectively bidding against themselves. What happened when you raised concerns? Martha's expression darkened. I was removed from the treasurer position at the next board meeting. Patricia cited communication issues and had her allies vote me out. That's when I stopped being involved with the HOA. Would you be willing to share this story more widely? I asked. Martha hesitated. I've lived here 15 years. I don't want conflict with neighbors. I understand, I assured her. But this kind of financial self-dealing is exactly why we need changes in leadership. After consideration, Martha agreed to write a statement that we could share with homeowners who had questions about HOA financial management. As the August election approached, tensions in the neighborhood continued to rise. Patricia's tactics escalated from subtle warnings to more direct attacks. A new flyer appeared, questioning the qualifications of the challengers. Experience matters. What has Yates Lawson done for our community in his 6 months of residency? What does Julian Martinez know about property management? Don't risk Pinewood's future on unproven leadership. Our group chose not to respond in kind. Instead, we organized a community cookout at the park within our neighborhood, not an official HOA event, just neighbors gathering to meet the candidates informally. We invited everyone, including Patricia and her slate. To my surprise, Patricia attended, along with her most loyal supporters. The atmosphere was tense at first, but as people mingled and talked, some of the animosity began to dissolve. I even had a brief, civil conversation with Patricia about our shared interest in native gardening, a glimpse of the person behind the HOA president persona. The night before the election, I received an unexpected visitor, Thomas Wagner, the board secretary who had seemed to be working with Jessica to reform the system from within. I shouldn't be here, he said nervously when I invited him in. But there's something you need to know before tomorrow's vote. Thomas explained that Patricia had been pressuring board members to manipulate the election procedures, changing the voting location at the last minute, implementing strict ID requirements that hadn't been used before, and planning to disqualify ballots on technicalities. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Thomas sighed heavily. Because this isn't what I signed up for. I joined the board to help the community, not to protect someone's fiefdom. Patricia's been getting more desperate as she sees support shifting away from her. What do you suggest we do? Be prepared, he advised. Bring copies of the bylaws regarding election procedures. Have witnesses watching the ballot box at all times. And don't let Patricia or Jessica handle any aspect of the vote counting. I thanked Thomas for the warning and immediately called Julian and Dr. Reynolds to develop a strategy for ensuring a fair election. The annual meeting and election was held in the community center on a sweltering August evening. Nearly every homeowner in Pinewood Estates attended, unprecedented participation, according to longtime residents. As Thomas had warned, Patricia attempted several last-minute procedural changes, including moving the ballot box to a side room where it would be less visible. Dr. Reynolds, armed with the bylaws, calmly but firmly objected to each deviation, insisting on adherence to established procedures. The tension reached its peak when Patricia announced that Jessica and her nephew would count the ballots in a private room for efficiency. The bylaws require that counting take place in view of any homeowners who wish to observe, Dr. Reynolds stated, reading directly from the document. We insist on transparency. After nearly 20 minutes of debate, Patricia relented. The ballots would be counted on a table at the front of the room, observed by representatives from both slates. The counting process was painstaking but fair. When the final tallies were announced, The result was clear: the Pinewood renewed slate had won every position except one. Patricia had maintained her seat on the board, but was outvoted by the new majority. Julian was elected president, Dr. Reynolds as treasurer, and I secured an at-large position. Patricia's face remained impressively composed as the results were announced, but the tight grip she maintained on her purse betrayed her emotions. After a brief statement congratulating the winners and highlighting her continued dedication to the community, she left the meeting early. The first board meeting under the new leadership was held 2 weeks later. Julian, taking his role as president seriously, had prepared a comprehensive agenda focused on transparency and communication. Patricia attended but remained mostly silent, her participation limited to necessary votes. Our first order of business was reviewing and approving the covenant revisions that Jessica and Thomas had begun. With input from the community, we expanded the changes to include clearer guidelines for enforcement, an appeals process for violations, and strict rules against board members contracting with relatives or benefiting financially from HOA decisions. Over the following months, the atmosphere in Pinewood Estates gradually shifted. The obsessive focus on minor violations gave way to a more balanced approach addressing genuine issues while allowing reasonable flexibility. The revised covenant was approved by a community-wide vote in October with over 80% support. Patricia remained on the board but seemed to withdraw from neighborhood affairs. In November, she listed her house for sale, and by Christmas, a moving truck was parked in her driveway. On her last day in the neighborhood, I stopped by with a small gift, a book on native Tennessee gardening we had discussed at the cookout. "I'm sorry to see you go," I said honestly. "Despite our differences, I know you care deeply about this community." Patricia accepted the book with a tight smile. 15 years I spent building this place," she said, a hint of bitterness in her voice. "No one will remember that now. They'll just remember me as the tyrant who painted your garage." "That's not entirely fair," I acknowledged. "The community standards you established did help maintain property values. We're just continuing that work with a different approach." She nodded, something like respect briefly crossing her face. "Perhaps. Well, good luck with it. These things tend to be cyclical. Someday, the pendulum will swing back to stricter enforcement when people realize why it was necessary." As winter melted into spring, the 1-year anniversary of my move to Pinewood Estates arrived. The neighborhood had changed in subtle but important ways. Community events had higher attendance. Homeowners felt comfortable making reasonable improvements without fear of arbitrary enforcement. And while property values hadn't suffered, in fact, they'd continued to rise, there was a new emphasis on Pinewood being not just a collection of well-maintained houses, but a community of people. My garage door, the unlikely catalyst for all this change, functioned perfectly through storms and sunshine alike. Sometimes, as I pressed the remote to open it after a day at work, I would think about Patricia and the chain of events her unauthorized painting had set in motion. In June, as we prepared for another Independence Day celebration, Julian and I sat on my back patio, enjoying the evening breeze and cold beers. "You know what's funny?" Julian mused. "If Patricia had just let you handle your insurance claim normally, she'd probably still be running things her way." "The irony isn't lost on me," I agreed. "One overstep too many." "The real question is," Julian said with a grin, "are you ready to run for HOA president next term? I'm thinking 1 year is enough for me." I laughed, thinking about how reluctant I'd been to get involved at all. "Ask me again after we get through the summer pool season. I hear enforcing the no-running rule is where presidents really earn their stripes." As the sun set over Pinewood Estates, I couldn't help but feel grateful for how things had turned out. What had begun as a property dispute had transformed into meaningful community change, proof that sometimes standing up for your rights can ripple outward in unexpected ways. And somewhere in another neighborhood, I hoped Patricia had found a new balance, still caring about standards and aesthetics, but perhaps with a bit more flexibility and a lot less paint.